Welcome to the DISCy Chicks. Cindy Jacoby, my partner in crime, and I are delighted to have you come back and join us as we continue the conversation about selling skills. We are doing, this is series of 4, and we're in number 3, and we're going to be talking about the steady behavior style selling to all the other behavior styles. Right, Cindy?
Absolutely, yes. And we started off with the D and the I, and now it's all about the high S.
Yes, it is. We're excited. And for all you steadies out there that are listening, yes, you too can be a very effective salesperson.
It's true.
And
It's true.
and we're going to talk about that. One of the number one things in being a good person is relationships.
Yeah.
And that high steady is all about relationships. And how that plays out, of course, is different from that other relationship dimension of the influencer, but they are everybody's best friend, which is a wonderful trait to have, and rapport building capability to have in the selling situation.
Yeah, I think that the S, their natural inclination is to get along.
Yes.
They're accommodating, they don't like conflict, but they're also persistent and not emotional. It's really hard to read a high steady sometimes, and they're a great listener. So there are definitely communication styles that will go very easily for them. Others may be a little harder to adapt to, but just their nature in general is one that people tend to like and want to spend time with, just because they do listen to the chatty eyes and things like that. So,
and one of the words you use to describe them is that persistence. They don't give up. They don't want to give up. So if they are truly motivated by the product that they're selling, then guess what? They're probably going to be more persistent than any of the other styles to get you to yes, which is great.
And they're persistent, but they're not necessarily, they're not aggressive. They'll keep coming back, but not in an aggressive way. Their time is their friend. They're very
kinder, gentler.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, they don't want the conflict, but they, if they believe in something, like you said, they'll keep reaching out.
Right.
Until they make the sale, hopefully.
Exactly.
So I think S is the steady is probably really good for a longer sale cycle.
Mm-hmm.
They're not smile and dial, quick kind of people. Because again, they like that relationship part. It's not all transactional to them.
Right.
So
exactly. All right. Well, I'm going to kick it off with that steady selling, that high steady selling to a high dominant.
Oh, have fun with that.
I know, exactly. And that high steady has to remember that direct communicator is looking for results. So when they are doing their planning before the sales call, they've really got to keep that in mind and look at how they can paint a picture without a lot of words.
Yeah.
But paint a picture to that high dominant of what that results can do for them and the problem they're trying to solve, whatever that high steady is selling. So, and remember that high dominant is very, very different from that high steady from a behavioral standpoint.
Absolutely.
They're more forceful, they're decisive, they're strong-willed, independent, and, again, trying to get to that problem solution process as quickly as possible. So that high steady really has to look out for that high dominant putting pressure on them and wanting them to move quicker and to get to that solution faster. So that steady doesn't necessarily need to do the chat up thing, which they don't really, they go for more meaningful conversations anyway. So the modification that high steady is going to have to do is to take their energy up, take their pace up, and be able to really deliver their selling properties in a way that can really convince that high dominant that this is the solution for them. This is going to get them the results, and give them some examples of
Do you think it's
how this has worked for other companies.
Do you think it's hard for a high steady to be able to pivot? Because I think I just see a D changing directions pretty quickly, and
Yeah.
it's they're probably like, no, I'm trying to follow this procedure, you know.
Yeah, no, pivoting is not a strong suit, but they need to be prepared for that. But what about this? And what about that? And probably pilfering that steady with questions about how things mechanically work with the product that they're selling. So they need to be on high alert, which is not a high strength for a high steady,
Right.
but all they got to do is modify to get through this sales pitch and get them to yes, and not necessarily have expectations of it making a new best friend.
Yeah, I just think I would sense the study is kind of following an order, following maybe even a script or
Formula.
a formula, and they might get rattled if they have to do a pivot really quickly. So
Yeah.
that's something I think we would recommend to the studies to be ready on some plan Bs and plan Cs if plan A gets derailed by a fast moving D.
And the good news is that high steady, remember, they don't give you much. They don't show a lot of emotion. So if a D decides to pivot, that steady is going to be able to keep that poker face and act like, oh, well, I'm ready for this. But
when it might not be true on the
yeah. But it's all a mindset thing, in my opinion. So,
well, let's talk about that high steady selling to a low D
low dominant,
or a reflective communicator.
Right.
In a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities. I think it's important to remember that the reflective communicator is looking for agreement. And not that dissimilar to a high steady who doesn't like a lot of conflict. So that low D is, low key, modest, mild, cooperative, a lot of the same things that you would notice in a high S, a high steady. So it's a really good match, I would say, for the salesperson. There's a lot of overlap in their ways of thinking and their styles. So they could probably come to a mutually beneficial solution when it comes down to it, and that's easy and enjoyable for both of those. So I think one of the warning signs is that you need to keep the interaction on the rails. They might get too deep into details and kind of forget the main picture of getting the sale closed, and you can go back and add those details later. You don't want them to get bogged down in that. So I think the warning for the high steady is to keep things on track, keep things focused, and make sure that the conversation is moving along, and not to get too sidetracked on details, which they all really like. So descriptors of that low D, like I said, agreeable, low key, unobtrusive. They're inquisitive. They'll ask questions. Think about the opposite of a high D who's just trying to steamroll through. You can go a lot slower and give a little bit more information, because that low D will like information. They'll likely want to maybe bring some others into the decision instead of just freight training it through like a high D might. So I'd say that's a pretty good matchup. The low S, the high S, low D, low dominant.
Yeah. And the beauty of this is that high steady is not having to modify as much as that high dominant, so they can be themselves. They're not sitting on pins and needles waiting to see what that high D is going to throw at them, but they can be themselves and just more naturally be in their high steady selling style.
Right.
And it's just going to be easier, more comfortable, and hopefully get to yes,
Not
just
as scary.
just as, yeah, as effectively. Yeah. Yeah.
All
But
right.
you're right. I mean, that's a good one for them, especially as we come upon how a high steady sells to a high outgoing communicator. This is the high influencer. And remember that outgoing communicator is looking for the experience,
Yes.
the emotional experience, having fun, being social. They're very optimistic and enthusiastic, and move at a very fast pace. This high influencer, great creative problem solvers, and great at negotiating conflicts. And the truth of the matter is, both that high steady and that high influencer are very relationship oriented.
Mhm.
So they're going to get along easier than that high dominant, in my opinion. But the pace is different. And as if you're the high steady and you are the person selling, you are the one that's going to have to adapt. You can't
Absolutely.
expect your client to adapt. So, what do you do? What do you do in there with that high influencer? You allow them to talk and kind of ideate if that's where they go, because they're giving you lots of great information when they do that.
True.
And you just need to, stay on track with where they're headed, with what their needs are, with all that enthusiasm, and then be able to come into a presentation of a product or initiate a conversation about your product so that they can see the potential to be their solution. Now, that high steady likes to be methodical and more detailed, but they don't need to do that with that high influencer. It will shut them down if you get into data and statistics and all the research you did. Don't go there.
Exactly.
Because you're going to lose them. You're really going to lose them. But, remember that influencers is there for the experience and to have a little fun. So, you're going to have to raise your energy. You're going to have to bring up that sense of humor that we know is in there, and really just personally connect with them so that they like you, trust you, then they'll want to buy from you. And that, I think, is something, Cindy, is a more natural thing for a high steady to be able to do, in my opinion.
Well, we talk about a high steady in a meeting, like a business meeting. They're not the ones to speak up and talk unless asked, but what they're great at, and this goes along with what you were saying, working with the high influencer, is that when they're not talking, they're listening and they're taking all of this stuff in. And so often we always say at a meeting, before you leave, check in with that high steady and see what their ideas are, because they've taken it all in and then probably have some solutions. So I think your prescription is right. If you let that eye talk, that steady will kind of go back into their normal mode of information gathering.
Right.
They'll be able to use that in their sales process.
Yeah,
Good point.
absolutely. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Well, if you look at that high steady selling to the low I, or that reserve communicator, this is not a terrible match at all. The energy level is about the same. Again, the kind of slower introvert. I think the biggest tweak from selling to a high I to a low I is it's going to be more facts and details driven and less relationship driven. So the one thing they had in common with that high influencer is that they're both people, they're both relationship. The low I is not.
Right.
Yeah, the low I is very skeptical, and they will ask questions. They want to know data about things. They're not looking for that relationship, and they're also slow and low key. So I think that low I, or the reserve communicator, is also looking for something that's mutually beneficial to it's going to work right for him and his company. But they come across as very restrained and controlled and reflective, which does not bother the high steady at all. They're a little less social and more socially discreet. They're not that great at engaging in a lot of different styles. And again, the onus is on the seller to make the adjustments to meet that customer where they are.
Right.
So I would recommend that you focus on facts, focus on the product, and give them that detailed information that they need and be ready to answer questions.
Yeah.
They want to see your product, and so show it to them. It's kind of great.
Yeah.
They'll want to think about it before they close, but that's, S's are used to that anyway, that they'll want that information. So I think this is a good match. Just remember to kind of switch gears to data and details, not so much on trying to make a relationship with them.
Right. And the high steadies are fine with detail. I mean, they're not into it as much as that high compliant or this, low I, but they are into details. So I think, again, it's a great, easier selling situation for that high steady.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that one was easy. Let's move to the C, to that compliant.
Oh, well, this one is great. Steady communicator selling to another steady communicator. And guess what? Those two steadies are highly compatible. So just remember that. So the nice thing about this is they're both relationship oriented. They really are looking for understanding, and they both want to be liked and affirmed. So they can give each other exactly what they need in this selling situation, from my perspective, because that high steady is offering reassurances to that other high steady. And, they're not going to doubt themselves. They're not going to get overly anxious about it, and make sure to give enough facts to demonstrate the value of the product so that she can get that other high steady to yes as quickly as you would think she or he could. And following up on the conversation with any additional question answering or data that potential client is looking for is imperative, because they just need that to make decisions, and they may need more time as well. Just like that, the low I that you were just talking about, it just is important to do that follow up and follow through with that steady. Otherwise, they may sit on it longer than they need to.
But that's what a high steady does anyway. Like, they're great at the follow through, because that's what they need too. I would say a high dominant seller, they get frustrated with that.
Yeah.
They get like, you know what, I'll give you till tomorrow and then I'm done. But they're losing half their sales. That high steady is like, take the weekend, think about it. I'm here if you have questions. And they totally get that longer sales cycle. But again, probably what you were saying is that if they both take too long, it might not ever get done. So but they've got that persistence. So I think, like I said, it's a really good match.
Yeah. And they're both processors, so they get each other, which is great. Yeah.
All right. High steady selling to a low steady or a dynamic communicator. That the dynamic communicator, instead of looking for reassurances, they're looking for new ideas. They want to mix it up. I mean, literally, they are fast-paced, active, restless, outgoing. And that's, not the best matchup for a high steady. It's probably, I would say not a great matchup at all. That low steady, the dynamic, they're confident. They want to get things going. They're very flexible. They're not looking for reassurance. They're not looking for the reliability. They want it to be new and different and good. And they can change on a dime. So talking about being able to pivot, this is the group that you need to pivot for, because they may think of a whole new idea to use your product for. and you got to go with it. So saying, well, that's not really what it was meant for. It's like, they're going to
Mm-mm.
see new opportunities and new ways to do this. And it might even be smart when you're preparing, what are the different uses of this?
Yeah.
They would love something that was really versatile to be able to say, you can use it this way, you can use it this way.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Saturday Night Live skit from old. It's a it's a dessert topping, it's a floor polish, you know. That's old Saturday Night Live. So, but having these different ways of using the project would be very exciting to a low steady. So as far as approaching them, again, have some different options. You can be successful. It's going to take a lot of your energy to
Tons.
match the energy of the low. It won't be your favorite experience. We all like selling to people who are like us because we get us, and we doesn't take a whole lot of energy to either bring something down or bring it back up. But you really have to challenge yourself and match the pace of this low steady. Keep their attention by all the shiny new things it can do. You'll be pushing yourself, but you know, they won't know. They'll want you to keep up. And it's not as big a change for them. You know, you're not going to look awkward to them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So, it may be tougher for you, but just raise that energy, and they'll also be able to close really quick. The good news is that you can be one and done. You don't have to keep going back and enduring all of that excitement.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Martha, when we look at the DISC graph, you know, we talk about highs and lows, and that middle line is what determines whether you're high or low. And that's referred to as the energy line. And I used to think that was kind of a hippie, hokey, weird thing to call it, but it's so true. Like the farther you are away from that midline, that energy, if you're really high or really low, that's how much energy it's going to take to either rein it in or jack it up. And so energy is a great term for this. And, you know, you got to know what your other counterpart's energy level is.
Right.
Hope you can get there. And that takes energy in either direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was great. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
Well, now we're down to the high compliant and low compliant, with the steady selling to that high compliant. And remember that precise communicator, that high C, is looking for data. They're looking for information.
Yay.
And typically that steady and that compliant have a pretty doggone compatible relationship. However, there are needs of that high compliant prospect that you're calling on that's going to take a little bit of work for that high steady, in terms of they are going to be looking for lots of information. They're going to have lots of questions. And I would dare say prep time for this sales call to high compliant is going to be quite a bit for that high steady.
Yep.
The pace is the same, which is great. They're not having to adapt there. But the fact that that high compliant is looking for order and detail and processing time during the sales call, and, you know, just having all of your ducks in a row is going to be important. Otherwise, you're going to lose credibility with them, because that's how they are, and they expect you to meet that need. So I would say just be doggone prepared. I don't think you're going to be having to pivot as much as you would with that high dominant, but you're just going to have to know your product inside and out and be ready to have questions that challenge that knowledge, so that you can convince them that this is what they need to solve their problem. So the other thing to think about is, do not go into that relationship space with them. No. They are not the least bit interested in being your friend. You are just a provider of information to them, a vehicle for information. And don't touch them or get inside their personal space.
No hugging.
I mean, yeah, 3 feet. Is it 6 feet or 3
Wait,
feet, Cindy?
wait, it's 3 feet. 6 feet's
3
COVID.
feet.
3 feet is a C. Different C.
So, and then giving them plenty of time to reply to the information and respond to the information that you're giving them. And the thing is they're very skeptical by nature. They're kind of, as Cindy loves to call it, the voice of no. So
Mhm.
just expect that. And again, that high steady is not going to show a reaction to that.
Yeah.
They just are going to try to do their best to embrace it and to provide all the information that is needed to make that buying decision.
Yeah, it's a great matchup.
Yeah.
But you're right. Some homework ahead of time, be prepared, or follow up with more data because they'll read it. They open attachments, they love them. I think it's important to always remember that the high compliant is not a risk taker, and that's why they want all this data. They don't
Right.
want to go into uncharted territory. So,
Right.
again, any kind of testimonials from people who have used it, but it's people who they know, like, and respect,
Yeah.
not just some random schmo,
Yeah.
off the
And-
street.
And hey, they're going to love white papers. You got white papers about your product? Bring them.
Yeah, bring them.
Yeah.
All right, and I will wrap us up. Bring it home with the steady communicator selling to the low compliant, or what's nicely called the pioneer, the rule breaker. The pioneer is a lot more visionary, lot less detailed. So don't bring the white papers to the low C session. I mean, the pioneers are known for being independent, unconventional. They don't need the rule book in order to move forward. They're fine experimenting with different things, and they're outspoken. They're looking for the best outcome with the, in the best possible way. So they may also find a new use for your product.
Right.
Even though it may seem random to you. This is very different than how a high steady likes to operate, right? There's no structure. There's no order. It seems very random. It makes total sense for the low C, but it's a little stressful for the high S. So again, they're going to probably have a little bit more energy. The focus will be lacking. You might not get to go through your whole presentation with them, but just, try to keep up with them and feel them out and make sure that they can be successful using your product. They're big picture people. They're good. If you can throw it out there, they're good at placing it in their vision where they want it to be. You just got to get them enough information where they can see themselves using it or see it benefiting their company, and then they'll figure out the details on, how to make it work. Mm-hmm. So you really got to grab their attention, because if you drone on about, every rule and procedure, you're gonna lose them. Yeah. So it's gonna be a little tough. I'd say it's a tougher sale just because it's so unconventional, and the high steady likes that predictability. They like following the formula, and it's unlikely to unroll the way you want it to. But again, have a plan B, have a plan C, and try to get to the future and not bog down in the details. Try to let them see themselves using it and what it would look like. Right.
Well, I do hope that Cindy and I painted a beautiful picture for you high steadies to see how effective you can be in selling to others. Your gifts can really be played out in a sales role if that's something you're really motivated to do. So I think that is a positive message for every one of you. So thank you for joining us today, and remember to check us out at our website at DISCyChicks.com. All of our episodes can be found there. You can also take a free assessment there. And we are also on YouTube. We are also on Facebook if you're looking at video, And then we also have our Buzzsprouts, our podcasts that you can reach at the website as well. So we really appreciate you listening in, and we hope to see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we'll wrap this series up, and we'll talk about how a high compliant sells to all these different entities. So that'll be fun too.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
We'll see you next time, Martha.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.